This is the voice of reason from Antidote Radio. Antidote Radio will be on at a new time every Tuesday, 7:30 to 9. Antidote Radio with the voice of reason, 7:30 to 9 p.m. every Tuesday evening. Tune in for a listen. I talk about environmental health issues. I present clinical data that even your doctor doesn't know. I interview experts and researchers and scientists, and I present news and cheeky commentary, and I play hot music. So tune in every Tuesday from 7:30 to 9 p.m. Tell your friends, and if you're going to miss the show, you should probably tape it. 7:30 to 9. It used to be 7 to 8:30. There's been a change. Get with the program. Antidote Radio with the voice of reason, antidoting modern cultural toxicity left and right. Stereo, baby.
And be playing on TV.
Hello, everyone. This is Bonfire Matt again. We're not crazy. The system is. Tune into the Radical Mental Health Show hosted by the Freedom Center Wednesday nights, 6 to 7 p.m. on Valley Free Radio, WXOJ 103.3 FM.
And this is the Mental Health Show. I'm Will Hall, and I'm joined here with Reason from Antidote Radio. You just heard her promo. Welcome to the show, Reason.
My old promo.
And we're going to be talking about environmental illness, chemical sensitivity, toxins in our environment, our food, our lives, and the relationship that has to mental health issues.
Yes.
Which is really exciting because this is an issue that the Freedom Center and this show really need to talk more about. I don't think we've done a very good job of it, and I think we're gonna try and scratch the surface today. And first of all, I just want to welcome everybody to the show. And this is the Mental Health Show on Valley Free Radio. It's sponsored by the Freedom Center, which is a mental health advocacy, support, and activism group run by and for people who have been in the mental health system, who have diagnosed with different mental health diagnoses, different labels like schizophrenia, borderline, bipolar, and people who are questioning the politics of that, questioning the science, the corruption, the pharmaceutical companies, people who've had bad experiences, who've been abused in the mental health system and are looking for alternatives. So we encourage you to check out our website, which is freedom-center.org. There's a lot of information about mental health from a perspective outside of the mainstream and against the corporate misinformation that passes for science and psychology in our society. And there's a number of different services that we offer and different programs and activities that the Freedom Center does, all of which is at our website, freedom-center.org. We have yoga, free yoga on Monday nights, 7 o'clock. And it's actually in a new location, which is 32 Masonic Street. This is the longest, well, I want to say it's the longest running free yoga class in Northampton, but it's actually the only free yoga class in Northampton. It's surprising because there are so many yoga teachers and so many yoga studios, but this is the only free yoga class, and it's open to the community. You don't have to be a mental health consumer or involved with the mental health system, although a lot of folks from the Freedom Center participate. You go to the class, you won't be able to tell who's who. There's no intake procedure. We don't sort of try and figure out what people's backgrounds are or anything like that. It's open to the community. It's a beginner's class, and it's in a wonderful new space, 32 Masonic. We have yoga mats, so come and check it out. That's the Somatic Institute, which is right next to the Woodstar Cafe in downtown Northampton. So that's Mondays at 7. And before that on Mondays is our acupuncture clinic, which is at 430 43 Main Street. Actually, no, it's 43 Center Street in downtown Northampton. That's right next to the police station. And that's a group treatment of ear acupuncture, which is excellent for detoxing the body. It's excellent for supporting the immune system, for addiction, cravings, recovery issues, sleep, depression, anxiety. A lot of people have found the acupuncture extremely helpful for all these things, and this is a free group treatment that's offered every Monday at 4:30 in downtown Northampton, 43 Center Street. We also opened a new clinic in Springfield, which is at 1695 Main Street on Tuesday nights. So you've got 2 opportunities for free acupuncture, and we got an opportunity for some free yoga. And we also have our support group, which is an emotional peer-run support group. It's also really good for finding out resources about holistic health, getting your questions answered about legal matters, human rights issues you may be facing, different kinds of referrals to resources in the community, involvement with our activist programs and our different educational work. So check that out. It's Thursdays, 7 o'clock at 43 Center Street. And there's a lot of different things that we're involved in. Freedom-center.org is the website. The only other thing I want to call your attention to at the moment, although there's a lot of stuff up there, is the legal training series, the Law and Psychiatry legal training series. The next one is August 22nd, and it's going to be talking about restraint and seclusion, as well as a number of other topics, hosted by Nancy Svirida, a lawyer with the Disability Law Center. That is free, 5:30 to 7:30 on Tuesday, August 22nd. So check that out. So it's really an honor for me to be welcoming our guest, Reason, from Antidote Radio. And I guess I wanted to start off the show just, saying a little bit about Ed Charla. People may know Ed has been a big organizer with Valley Free Radio for years. Actually, Ed was first involved with Valley Free Radio. I remember being involved in meetings and stuff with him like 5 years ago, and he's been a real cornerstone of the social justice and activist community. He passed away a few nights ago, and there's going to be a memorial for him tomorrow. There's more information at the Valley Free Radio website. So we're all saddened by Ed's passing. He passed peacefully, and he had some chronic health problems for a long time, and his health was very frail, but he was a very strong and powerful spirit, and it's just kind of really a shock that he's suddenly no longer with us. So I just wanted to say that and just honor Ed's work, and he will definitely be missed here at Valley Free Radio,
and his spirit will live on.
Yeah, absolutely. So so welcome to the show.
Thank you, Will. I'm really happy to be here. It's my first real guest appearance on another VFR show.
Yes, pioneering once again.
Excellent.
The Freedom Center pioneering. Well, cool. Well, I mean, there's so much to talk about. We're just going to be able to scratch the surface. I just really want to emphasize how great your show is on Valley Free Radio. People can check it out. It's Tuesdays, 7:30 to 9. Is that right?
Yes, an hour and a half. Woohoo!
And you have a website, right?
Yes, antidoteradio.com.
And what is some of the kinds of things that you talk about on the show?
Well, everything related to environmental health. So I will interview people that are either suffering with different chronic illnesses or are researching, doing science. I'll talk to doctors. I had my first manufacturer on last night from Austin Air, who does air filtration. And I talk about what it's like to be chemically sensitive, how people get that way. I try to keep things interesting and fun, and it can actually be heavy material.
Yeah.
And that's why I will try to keep some of it lighter, because who wants to sit and listen to dry clinical data? People just aren't going to do it. I mean, this isn't like delectable information on its own. It needs a little like juice.
Yeah, and you do a great job. It's definitely an excellent show. You've been on the air since the beginning of Valley Free Radio, like the mental health
It's
show.
like a year now.
It's been like a year, yeah. It's like, I think, our anniversary. We went on the air like August something.
My first show was August 9th.
Yeah. Ours was like August 4th or something.
Oh, this is so exciting.
Yeah,
Happy birthday to us.
Happy birthday, Valley Free Radio. So there is so much to talk about, and we were, we were kind of just sort of talking about in the beginning of the show how there may be 3 different areas or ways you can approach this issue. One is people who have multiple chemical sensitivity. Then there's people who are labeled with mental illnesses like schizophrenia or anxiety or panic disorder. And then there's the overlap between them. And I guess there's probably another angle, which is that a lot of people who are having very real toxic reactions to their environment get told that they're actually not having them and that they actually are mentally ill instead.
Yes.
Because the mainstream medical establishment doesn't really, a lot of the mainstream medical establishment doesn't really believe that toxic, but I mean, you know from your own experience, and I'll talk a little bit about myself too, because I have some chemical sensitivity myself, that this is a real thing.
Well, there's this interesting overlap in terms of diagnosis or misdiagnosis and myth, because there's this whole faction basically calling MCS, or multiple chemical sensitivity, psychosomatic or hypochondria or Munchausen syndrome or all kinds of things that have nothing to do with a physiological disease, which it absolutely is. But there's this whole resistance to the actuality of it. And so we're labeled really as having psychological problems.
Right. And I think just like the greenhouse effect, you've got industry people who are paid, flax scientists who are paid to, discredit it. There actually are pesticide companies actually do pay sham websites and sham lobbyists to discredit multiple chemical sensitivities.
That's right. Absolutely. And I used to work in PR, so I know from the inside what it looks like. This stuff is real. That's not just something we're saying.
You used to work in PR.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, we'll talk about that.
In fact, we did some stuff for drug companies. I remember what we did for Viagra.
Wow.
And we planted news. What PR does is plant news. And it's not news. It's a commercial.
And especially local news agent programs, they don't have any budget, so they just get the press release from the corporation or the government.
They get satellite feeds.
And they just send it right over the airwaves, and you don't even know where it's coming from.
Right.
So just back up a second and tell me, like, what is multiple chemical sensitivity, and also how did you first sort of find out or know that or discover that that's what was going on for you, and then how does it really affect you? What's your life like for people who don't know you or don't know your show?
Wow, that's like, I could talk about that for the next 3 days.
Right.
Okay. Well, what's interesting is in our culture we frame everything in a psychological sort of a framework. We put it in psychological languaging. So when I was first getting sick, I assumed everything was my fault. I assumed, I just need to go to therapy or something. I assumed what people will often assume upon me now. And what it did was it stopped me from being able to make the connections that I needed to make in time to save my health. So what I did was I made excuses and tolerated and looked in all the wrong directions for a solution. Meanwhile, I was getting poisoned by a natural gas heater, a furnace in my living room, which is completely not healthy and causes huge problems. And it's a sensitizer. So once you become sensitized, that's a permanent thing. So I was in this apartment getting sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker and like, and there's something about our culture that makes us feel guilty, and it makes us feel everything is something that we're supposed to solve on our own, and we have to pull ourselves up. It's very American. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And it's very patriarchal, which our culture is. Very patriarchal. Well, just buck up, And it has nothing to do with like, all right, let's just sit down and be quiet and think about what this could possibly be. And I never once, despite my level of awareness, never once did I associate my symptoms with my environment. So anybody that thinks that people are just like all of a sudden start calling themselves environmentally ill, I mean, it's just not true. That's completely false. So I ended up having growing symptoms of all varieties in all body systems for years, 6.5 years. Basically. And that was in this one particular apartment. There were a few other things before that, but they were mainly related to new carpet, new construction, natural gas, and then later pesticides. And I would go to doctors and they would give me drugs. It's the same thing with mental stuff. They prescribe and prescribe and prescribe, and they gave me tons of antibiotics. And at one point, I started noticing that I was becoming sensitive to things. Like I would make jokes like that I could smell dishwashing detergent from down the block. And I just found that to be like, I don't know, I was like, that's amusing. And at one point I thought that I was cool and I was special because, I can smell anything and I'm very sensitive, so that makes me special. I didn't realize that I was like really in trouble, deep trouble. And my body was just getting worse, and my quality of life was just going down and down and down and down. But, in my family of origin as well, we're taught to, just make the most of everything. So, and also specialists are expensive and they don't sometimes take insurance. So I was seeing regular doctors, and if I could just encourage anything, one of the things is trying to find specialists, and it's worth literally anything it costs you to see, even just to get a little piece of information. But, you can find stuff on the internet readily now as well. You don't even need a doctor sometimes. You can just do some research and watch how your body responds and go, oh, I'm allergic to blah, blah, blah. And some of it's not that hard. But what ended up happening was I noticed that I was becoming sensitive to certain things like perfumes and this and that. And so I had just started with the internet and just started getting searching going, and it was the mid-90s or so. And I typed in 2 words that I did not associate at all with anything except these experiences I'd been having. I wrote chemicals, and sensitive. And I was like, I wonder what I'm going to find. And I started finding, there's something called chemical sensitivity. Interesting. And then I promptly blew it off because nobody that I had started emailing with really explained it to me. And there wasn't the kind of internet that there is now. The information was simply not the way that it is now. And you can find anything you want at this point. Then it was just enough to sort of put the seed in my head, but I didn't really take it seriously. 3 years later to the week, my body crashed. And I ended up going and looking back and finding those emails on my computer because I'm a pack rat and I save everything and I save all my emails. And it was exactly 3 years to the day. And I was like, oh my God, I'm one of these people. And I just hadn't realized it. And I had allowed, and the culture and my doctors and everybody around me had allowed me to get that much worse, that I now had a very serious condition.
And it sounds like some of the so-called treatments that you got, like the antibiotics, may have actually made things
absolutely
worse. And were people telling you at this point, oh, you're crazy, you have a somatoform disorder or something like that?
No, they weren't. And I didn't see like a psychiatrist or anything like that.
So they're saying it was depression or anxiety? Or?
No, they weren't saying that. What it was, and this is, I think, very interesting. In my case, I don't have like a psychiatric background. And what I think is very interesting is how the cultural myths and understandings live in the back of your head. Nobody has to say it to you. There's this little thing in the back of your head saying, you're just stressed out. Or like, here's an example. When I moved into this really toxic apartment, the one that really just busted me head to toe, I cried every day for a year. And so that was my example of depression. I'm not a depressed person. I've never been a depressed person, but that was my experience with this particular place. That was my initial reaction to that apartment. I didn't even experience myself as depressed, generally speaking, during that time either, but I would cry every single day. And I thought, well, this is probably because I broke up with my boyfriend, but my heart's been broken plenty of times and I never cried every day for a year. So to me, that gives an indication that mood changes may be one of the first signs that you're being exposed to something.
I know that one of the things that I discovered about myself is that I would go, living in San Francisco, I would go into laundromats and I would, come out and I would be like really irritable and angry. Yeah. And for the longest time, and then I finally just put 2 and 2 together because I don't have it as extreme as you do, but I do have chemical sensitivity. I can't go into like Staples or someplace where they have photocopiers going, or go into Agway or someplace because I will immediately have a response, and then I'll have to do this sort of mental jump to remind myself that, oh, it's not me, I'm actually having a reaction. I can find a cause to this and actually make that connection. And it's really a hard thing to do when you're just on your own and no one is supporting you to make those connections, and the whole culture is telling you that, oh, that can't be true, that can't be possible.
And it feels like it's you, because it's your brain and it's your central nervous system, and when your mood shifts, it's you. Yeah. And this is, you just bring up the most important thing to me, because these things in our culture are literally changing who we are. Because if they're creating aggression, which they are, if they're creating irritability, if they're creating learning disorders, learning disabilities, if they're creating the whole list, anxiety and panic disorder, if they're creating sleep disturbance, I mean, all these things, it's changing who we are. To ourselves, even. So
it's the things we're exposed to, and it's also the foods that we eat. Did you find that you're really sensitive to chemicals in foods, and you had to change your diet? And
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the things just comes along with it. Eventually, if you're chemically sensitive, you're going to develop food sensitivities. It's just the way it works. It's just one of the pieces.
So what do you have to do now to take care of yourself and to be able to show up to do your radio show and come into the studio and that kind of thing?
In order to have a planned event that I show up for and have any kind of respiratory, cognitive, or vocal function, I have to limit where I go, what I do, how much I talk, and what I breathe, to an extreme extent if you compare it to your average American who does not have to think about stuff. Well, who should be but is not. So like today I brought with me a nebulizer because we have a smog alert today. I brought the stuff that because I can't do albuterol. I brought an oxygen tank with me. I brought a mask. I brought a throat spray. I brought my special lozenges that help my throat, and they're really strong ones.
We've got an air filter going in.
We have an air filter in the studio.
Yeah.
I had to plan in advance and have them have the AC on in here because the studio can definitely be a problem. For some reason, we're in the basement, and it's so hot down here.
Yeah,
I've never been in
what
a
is up
hot
with that?
basement before.
Yeah.
It's really weird, but the studio is like really crazy in the heat. I have to take liver supportive stuff in order to be able to do anything really ever. I have to take antioxidants, like expensive ones like alpha lipoic acid, which is not cheap, but I have to take it. And if I don't take certain stuff, I can't get out of bed.
And did you find out sort of the different things to do and the supplements to take, just sort of trial and error, or you found a really good specialist to work with? Or because I'm wondering if someone's listening to the show, and I should mention for people who are just signing in, we're talking with Reason, who is the producer and host of AntidoteRadio.com, and that's the website. Antidote Radio is a show that's on Valley Free Radio Tuesdays 7:30 to 9 about environmental illness and multiple chemical sensitivity. And we're talking especially about its relationship to mental health kinds of issues. And I completely forgot what I was just asking you about. But
we were talking about what I have to do in order to...
If people want to call in and have questions, the studio phone is 585-1033.
Yes, in the 413 area code.
I was asking, actually, if people are listening and they feel overwhelmed, because you handed me when you got here, you handed me this book, Natural Healing for Schizophrenia and Other Common Mental Disorders, because I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And I absolutely know that chemicals and toxins and health and holistic stuff is real, because that is how I am able to function in the world and able to deal.
Because you went through a learning curve?
I went through a whole experience, a trial and error experience. I actually had a good friend who was diagnosed with HIV and fortunately did not do Western medical stuff, because she would probably be dead if she had done Western medical stuff. And through that, I learned a lot of stuff about psychoneuroimmunology and the connections, and slowly started taking my life together. But even a book like this, Natural Healing for Schizophrenia, I get overwhelmed. There's so many different supplements that you can take. There's so many different, and so I'm wondering for you, what would you recommend someone who's listening to the show, like as a first step, or would it be a book or a website? Or I know people can maybe even contact you through your website, or
yes.
How would people approach this monster kind of issue?
Well, I can say that one of the big things to do is start to familiarize with the things that your doctor probably isn't telling you, whether that is a psychiatrist, psychologist, or a physician. There's a lot of stuff that we are not being told. So it's up to us to do research. It's up to us to actually start thinking about it ourselves and not wait for somebody who we've maybe put our health in their hands. It's really in our hands. So my site has a lot of beginning kinds of things if you want to peruse that. And it's in a language it's accessible language. I've purposefully made it that way. AntidoteRadio.com. I would say that the beginning is that a shift in responsibility taking for your life and accountability for your own health and well-being. And then I would say the next thing is not supplements or physicians. I would say the next thing is, the world that we live in is polluted. We live in a post-industrial society that has not caught on yet to the reality in which we live. But our bodies are catching on, and our brains are being affected, and things are happening. And the awareness is really where we're lacking right now. The ignorance is what's killing us more than the chemicals at this point. So one of the things to do, you may not be able to stop, George Bush right now, or you might not be able to stop the local, even there might be some activism you can do. There's going to be local pollution. There's going to be cars. But you can limit your own exposures. You can start with your house. We live there, we sleep there. And if there's a lot of products on the market that everyone really does believe, like for the most part in America, that these products are safe and they've been tested for our safety and that someone is watching our back. That is not true. People are not watching your back. The stores are full of toxic things that we literally trust, that if we bring into our house, slather on our bodies, breathe up our nose, eat with our mouths, and we're just like marinating ourselves in toxic chemicals. So I say start there. Start shopping at health food stores. I've been talking a little bit about Trader Joe's on Antidote Radio, how it's a really good, because they have like a lower price point than a really fancy health food store or something, or Whole Foods. It's a good place to start. Whole Foods market is great if you can afford it. But you know what? There's a price in the long run. You know, what's really a bargain? If you're saving money now, you're probably going to pay later.
But it's a good point that you raise, because this is definitely a class issue. I mean, right now, the people who are able to get access to the information and think critically and bust through a lot of the myths, it's a class thing. And then the ability to use the money that you need to reduce your exposure and support yourself. That's something we talk about a lot at the Freedom Center, because we don't just offer holistic services. We also try and think about who has access to those services. And I mean, I think a lot of it sounds like is also trial and error. I mean, just reducing your exposure and seeing if you improve. I mean, that's pretty much. And
some of it is really about not buying something. There's no need to buy fabric softener. That's extra stuff, you know? And if you're really, 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 really into white clothes and bleach, I don't know, maybe buy less white clothes so you don't have to use bleach.
And these are chemicals that'll affect you, but also affect people around you as well. I mean, a lot of places now are starting to become aware of the fact that if people are showing up with perfume or fabric softener or heavy industrial, or not even industrial, home use detergents, that people can't be around them or can't be in that same space if they're chemically sensitive. So.
Yes. And there's this design company right now that's making clothes out of bamboo, which is this really awesome way to make clothes, because it's got like antibacterial properties and it's really soft and stuff. And they've got this new T-shirt out, and it says on the front, "Listen for canaries," which I thought was so cool, because the whole idea, which some people probably already know about this, and maybe there's somebody out there that doesn't, but there's the whole concept of miners would bring canaries into the coal mine, and then if the bird stopped singing or dropped dead, then they knew to get the heck out of there because they're next. I'm a canary.
Right.
You know?
They're not going to say, well, the canary, why is the canary different than the humans? Why? This must be a genetically inferior species because it's not as because I mean, essentially what we're talking about is that some people, everyone in the culture is being exposed.
Yes.
Some people have reached a tipping point where there's a certain vulnerability that occurs, and it's more and more people, and it's going to be more and more people. It's affecting.
And it's growing. The numbers of sensitive people are growing.
Well, think of the issue of asthma, for example. I mean, 10 years ago, asthma was like a freakish thing that you didn't really hear about too much, except, one or two people. But now, asthma is becoming a really mainstream issue in a lot of ways.
It's huge.
And this is definitely, it's a sign of what's coming. Because, I mean, one of the things that we were talking about briefly was when they're doing they're doing testing on the safety of so-called individual chemicals. But then when you actually combine the chemicals together, they're not even looking at that.
Yeah, people don't realize that sometimes when testing on a product is done, it's done on one aspect of their product, not the whole product, and not together. And then they're testing it on healthy, middle, like 30-year-old, 20-year-old males. They don't test it on women, pregnant women, old people, children, people with compromised immune systems of any kind.
Right, people who might have all the different other factors that are going on in people's lives.
And so what that relegates the rest of us to is acceptable risk. We're considered acceptable risk. Well, you know what? They might die. Whatever.
Right. Well, I mean, it's, there's something that we talk about a bit at the Freedom Center, and it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but I think there really is a comparison to Nazism and eugenics and this idea of like, well, there are the healthy, superior people, and there are the other people who are genetically inferior, or they're the weaker ones, and we sort of have to tolerate them, and then,
they'll finally be killed off, and then we can be the strong race.
Survival of the fittest, or, I mean, these are very real sentiments in our culture that go back to very ugly origins. And of course, the eugenics movement and the Nazism sociobiology stuff actually was taken from the U.S. It actually originated in the U.S., and that's where Hitler and the Nazis picked up on it. So this is one of the ugliest kind of sides of our culture that
we talked about this on Antidote Radio just a few weeks ago.
It's a really big issue, and it gets even deeper because some of the people in our political structure actually are the Nazis. But we can talk about that on one of our paranoia specials. There's actually a great interview with John Judge, who's a researcher with Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, and he talked about this. But you mentioned kids. You said there was a study or a video that was done on children exposure in schools.
Yeah, people who have kids or are going to have kids, and even if you just want to see something that's really poignant and you want to learn, this will show you. Okay, there's a website. It's Dr. Doris Rapp. She has a best-selling book published years ago called "Is This Your Child? Discovering and Treating Unrecognized Allergies in Children and Adults," for children who are complaining, cranky, slow learners, aggressive, hyperactive, unwell, or depressed. And she does not go through the whole book and tell you all the different drugs you can put your child on.
Right, which is... Yeah,
she identifies why children have these reactions.
Right.
And they can be to mold and food and chemicals and bad air quality and things like that. And then there's a video, Environmentally Sick Schools, and they may have other videos. And what they show is children really, screaming, beating on themselves, beating on other children, beating on their parents, beating on their teachers, literally in completely uncontrolled fits. And as soon as you remove the incitant, whatever it is that has triggered them, whether it be a mold or a food, it could be any food, and you can be tested for food allergies and things like that. As soon as you remove it, the child is fine. And, somebody tell me right now who's benefiting when you put that child on a drug instead. It's the pharmaceutical companies, and that's it. Nobody else is benefiting when you put that kid on a drug.
Right.
So Dr. Rapp has a website, www.drrapp.com. And, it's really huge for children. And I know somebody right now who is just describing to me how hard it is right now because she has 3 sensitive children because they live in a horribly mold-infested house, and they can't get out because they can't sell the house now. So they're building this little shack to live in the backyard, basically. And, she was saying how hard it is with her oldest child because some days, because the mold is just too much for him, he just screams and beats on her all day long. And, talk about mood, it really affects her mood. She gets really depressed because she's in the house with this kid, and as soon as they leave the house, he's fine.
We did a show not too long ago about a family. Actually, one of the mothers, actually a Freedom Center organizer, and their relatives of the family. I think I might be getting a little bit confused about what the story exactly was, but there's going to be an archive of it on our website soon. But it was basically getting the kids, 8, 9, 10, on all these different psychiatric drugs. None of their symptoms improve. They're really, really out of control, having a lot of problems, and then getting them off the drugs, changing their diet, taking a look at toxin, taking a look at allergies, and the behavioral stuff improves dramatically. There's so many stories like this. And you're mentioning a number of books, and hopefully these books will be on your website, antidoteradio.com. People can check
I'm going to
that
have
out.
to put some little special thing for people to go to, and I'll put some of the things I have in front of me. Books by Dr. Sherry Rogers are very good. They're full of very accessible information. And one of the things that helps to antidote stuff like her writings is it helps to undo the myths that we live with in our brain that totally screw us up, that tell us the wrong message day after day after day. For example...
the problem is with us, that we're weak, we need to try harder.
That's right. The problem is not with us. The only problem we have to deal with really is ignorance and action. I'll give you an example of what she says in the beginning of her book. A headache is not a Darvon deficiency.
Right.
It just helps to even if you're not changing a supplement or something from what you read, just helping your own understanding of the world is helpful.
Absolutely. So I know you've done a lot of research on this stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the cutting edge science about exactly how this works and how does the nervous system and neurotoxicity? And I know that there's a lot of different theories about why is it that one person has a reaction and doesn't have a reaction? It's not because one person is affected and one person isn't. They're both affected.
Yes.
But it hasn't reached a certain point with the one person. It's like a straw that broke the camel's back of thing.
Well, we respond differently. Everyone's chemically sensitive. Anybody who thinks that they're not chemically sensitive is, you would have to be a non-living creature to not be sensitive. We are mediated by chemicals in our brain and in our systems. So we're all affected. It's just a matter of how. Some people are going to have migraines. Some people are going to have chemical sensitivity. Some people are going to have asthma. Some people are going to have, all kinds of mutations in their genes that they're going to pass on to their kids. And some people are going to get cancer.
And a lot of people might have things going on with them that they don't even realize until much later.
Oh, almost everyone.
Yeah.
Almost everyone. Because symptomology has become so normalized in our culture now that we actually don't even realize that we have a health problem because everybody's taking meds. Everybody's buying a ton of stuff from CVS that's over-the-counter treatment. And you notice more and more prescription drugs are getting, the over-the-counter classification. So you can just go and get them. So everybody's taking something, whether it be for toe fungus or, whatever the problems are. So everybody's got something going on. And then, if you just look at something like aspartame, for example.
Which is an artificial sweetener.
It's the artificial sweetener NutraSweet. I know somebody who I really need to tell this story.
Yeah.
He was drinking 4 Diet Cokes a day. And as some people might know, a lot of people who are drinking diet soda are addicted to it and they drink a lot of it every day. And that says something about the
what's
substance.
In it? Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And I suggested to this person that they get off the NutraSweet because I had I've never touched NutraSweet in my life. I remember actually, it was interesting, it was the early 70s and I was a little kid. And I remember a couple of things from TV. I remember Phil Donahue showing a birth, which was a big deal. And I remember somebody talking about the news coming on about NutraSweet being this new really cool sweetener and how it's really okay. And we're getting a phone call, so I'm distracted. He's coming back though. I can't do both.
Sorry about that.
I just can't do both. My poor brain is cognitive
I
impairment.
was trying to sneak a phone call in. It's actually somebody asking about our legal training series. Just check out our website, freedom-center.org, which you're talking about sweeteners.
Yeah, and I saw this news piece when I was a small child. I might have been like 6 or so. And they talked about, we've found this new sweetener and all we did was screw around with these molecules, and it's natural, even though we screwed around with these molecules. And I was like, And I was 6, and I was like, whatever. And luckily I didn't live in a family that was all jumping on those kind of bandwagons. So I never, ever touched NutraSweet. And the one time I did was by accident, and my tongue got all swollen. I couldn't smoke my cigarettes because at the time I was a smoker, and you couldn't do anything with my mouth. It was horrible, and it was like from a piece of gum. So in any case, I suggested this person after I came across all this information on how dastardly NutraSweet is. I sent it to him, and a few months later, I was like, hey, wait a minute. This person has a job now. They didn't have a job. They were on all kinds of meds from panic attacks and stuff. And when I had originally met them, they were working and normal and everything. And then all of a sudden they were like panic attacks and agoraphobia and on meds. And so months later I was like, hey, he's working. Let me check on him. And I thought about the NutraSweet and stuff. And I called him up and I was like, I have a question for you. Did you stop taking NutraSweet? He was like, oh yeah, I haven't touched it since you sent me that stuff. I was like, really? I was like, have you noticed that you're working now? And he was like, oh, you make a good point. I hadn't really thought of that.
Yeah, they're connections we have to make in both directions. Sometimes when our lives get better, we might take a look at how we're improving ourselves in terms of our toxic exposure.
Yeah, and then he confirmed that he got off his psychiatric meds because he was not on NutraSweet anymore.
That's great.
And he had not made the connection.
Wow. One of the Freedom Center yoga teachers had a similar story about NutraSweet, and she was had anxiety and depression for years, and was also like drinking Diet Coke all the time, and got off of it, and like wham, a lot of her symptoms just improved. So, and
here's what I have to say about that. There's some stuff on the internet that says all kinds of things about how NutraSweet is perfectly safe, blah 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 blah, and you know what? Do your own research. Talk to actual human beings.
Right.
You know, like that story and my story. That's where the real thing is. And that's why I say that people get too caught up on science. And, everything that needed to be proved has already been proved. Just go to your logic. And this is why I'm saying it's accessible. It's accessible if you use your instinct and your logic and you look at your immediate surroundings and you talk to people who have directly experienced something. And sometimes, quote unquote, experts haven't directly experienced anything. And sometimes they're just being paid and all they're really experiencing is money.
Yeah.
Right. Someone's paid to write this gobbledygook.
The most powerful toxic substance of all.
Oh, that's right.
So if people are just joining us, we're speaking with Reason, who is the producer and host of Valley Free Radio's show Antidote Radio, which is on Tuesdays, 7:30 to 9 p.m. And you can check out her website, which is antidoteradio.com. We're talking about multiple chemical sensitivities, environmental illness, toxins in our food and environment and how they affect our health, especially our mental health and well-being. So,
and I have some stuff I can just start throwing at you.
Lay it on us, sister.
All right. You had mentioned
I should point out, tell us the story of the plexiglass.
Oh, well, in front of me I have my papers that were printed out, and I carry a piece of plexiglass around with me because that's the only way I can read some printed materials, because the ink fumes up into my nose and then I am brain dead and I can't read anything. And
people who know me as an organizer know that the Freedom Center is hindered because I have a really hard time going into Paradise Copies or going to Staples or Kinko's to get photocopies done, because I wig out from handling flyers. So it's a really real issue.
Perfect segue too. What is the central nervous system? Let's just get into this a little bit, because you had asked about these specifics. Okay, so the central nervous system is associated with 174 different maladies if something goes wrong with it, according to wrongdiagnosis.com. Together, the brain and spinal cord form the central nervous system. This complex system is a part of everything we do. It controls the things we choose to do, like walk and talk, and the things our body does automatically, like breathe and digest food. The central nervous system is also involved with our senses, seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling, as well as our emotions, thoughts, and memory. Now, neurotoxicity is when you've toxed up your central nervous system and you've been exposed to something, and that can be either dermal on your skin because you rubbed it on or you touched it, and that could be mold. It could be a product like lotion or something, fabric softener that's getting on you from your clothing. The skin is the most permeable and largest organ of the body. And then you have inhalation, and there's no barrier between the nose and the brain. So if you've breathed something and you smell it, it's in your brain. And I could go on. But the signs and symptoms of neurotoxicity, or toxicity of the brain and central nervous system, they sometimes start as flu-like symptoms. Neurotoxic chemicals and heavy and organic metals attack the immune system. They attack and destroy the CNS, or the central nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. Many have target organs like the liver, brain, kidneys, etc. Medical symptoms include problems with memory, dizziness, lightheadedness, concentration, emotion, personality changes, sleep disturbances, including sleep apnea and insomnia. But sometimes your doctor's going to tell you your insomnia is because you're depressed, right?
Right.
Okay. Extreme tiredness and chronic fatigue symptoms, headaches, pain and or numbness in the arms, hands, legs, or feet, learning ability, loss of motivation. Somebody's going to tell you, what's wrong with you? Loss of interest in daily activities and hobbies. You're depressed. Here's some Prozac. Attentional, and hey, you know what? And I'm not going to, if that is working for somebody and that's what they're going to choose to do, that's fine. I'm not knocking it. But people need to be fully informed.
Right.
And my problem is they're not.
Right.
People are not informed.
Because these are coping mechanisms. Someone drinks beer as a way of dealing with their anxiety. They take Prozac as a way of stimulating themselves because they're depressed. I mean, these are coping mechanisms. The problem is we don't have accurate information about how those things work. We have more accurate information about alcohol than we do about Prozac, and we certainly aren't given access to options and choices about what might work instead if we don't want to introduce.
And the corporations and pharmaceutical companies and industry don't want us to have those choices. They want the power because the power means money in their pocket. But what I want is us to have our own power and be empowered to make our own decisions. And if you don't have the full story, you're making decisions based on what other people are telling you.
Exactly.
And I don't think that's working for us.
I don't think it's working for us either. Let's stop that. let's get past that.
And I think that basically, instead of being dependent on whether it be a physician or a pharmaceutical company or a pharmacy or whatever, and being dependent, I first of all, that's just not sustainable. It's just not. But it would be nice if those symptoms, and in many cases they are, within our power to control and change. And when you're taking a pill for something, like a heavy-duty chemical that's doing damage to your body, and you're dependent on someone prescribing it, and then you have to make sure insurance pays for it, and like sometimes these things are like hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month.
Yeah.
And you're dependent on that. Wouldn't it be great if you just like, I'm allergic to wheat.
Right.
And then you can just choose whether or not to eat wheat that day. And then it's up to you, and you don't have to carry around this bottle. Now, the problem is when you develop a chronic illness, now I don't have that much choice in terms of, I'm dependent on clean air. I have to have clean air or I don't do well, and that you just don't want to wait long enough for that to happen.
And I think at the more extreme stages of MCS, there are all kinds of Western medical interventions that people become dependent on because they just they just can't. Their lungs collapse, or they just can't function at all without. I don't even know what the treatments are, but I know some people who have some pretty heavy duty MCS, and for them, they're past the point of just going totally holistic or using herbs and homeopathy, because it's a point where the collapse is so great that the Western medical interventions become the only thing that they can really use.
Yeah, and I do require, not as much as some people, I need to have oxygen around. I need to have an air filter around. I need to have my 3M masks around. So there's a certain level of dependency.
Technology, yeah.
And yes, that I have to do. I think we should talk about some signs of neurotoxicity as well.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because we only have about 9 more minutes. But whatever's like the crucial, and we might have time for a phone call or two if people want to call us at 585-1033. But go ahead.
Other signs that may occur on a daily or weekly basis are frequent nosebleeds for no apparent reason.
Have you had that?
I had nosebleeds, yeah.
Wow.
And they would just start. I had a few other things. The list is so long I can't remember them all. Unable to recognize familiar faces, friends, or neighbors. Can you imagine going to a doctor and saying that you're having such and such and such, and then they're immediately going to say that you need to see a psychiatrist?
Right. The memory problems are not necessarily psychiatric disturbances. They might be toxic chemicals affecting you.
Absolutely. And then there's toxic encephalopathy. I do think we should mention, I'm just going to read you a quote from healthanddna.com. That's healthanddna.com. People have genetic differences in how they process medications and chemicals and things like that. And we're only making it worse because we're mutating ourselves at this point with the stuff we're being exposed to. So we're going to be more and more genetically susceptible as we go. But people should know about this kind of testing. Prescription drug reaction testing helps reduce the incidence of adverse drug reactions, a serious medical problem. More than half the population have at least one defect in these systems, which process 1/3 of the most commonly prescribed medicines, including Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, Coumadin, hydrocodone, Claritin, Ultram, and Haldol. And that's including those, not those limited to. Mm-hmm. And you had asked about other testing.
Yeah, but what you just said is an interesting question, because it may not be that is a defect. It may be just a variation.
Yes.
Some people are not. Some people respond to certain kinds of pharmaceutical drugs in one way, and some people respond in different ways. And then what do we put our focus on? Do we put our focus on, this person it doesn't quite genetically fit the norm, and so we want to change their genes, or we want to consider them to be inferior or somehow lacking. And then this is a big direction that pharmaceuticals are going in, is genetic testing and targeting to individuals about their own genetic responsiveness to treatment is extremely dangerous because of the possibility of going in a eugenics direction and considering one genetic profile to be superior, not because it's the most fit from a natural point of view, but because it most fits technology and it most fits the Western medical toxic framework. And then we have a society where we're basically selecting the people to fit into the technology exactly the same way that we select crops that fit into pesticides and herbicides and genetically change the crops in our agriculture, not to make them better crops. They're often much less robust from a natural standpoint, but it's like you change nature to fit the needs of technology rather than the other way around.
Pure brilliance, Will.
It's dangerous and scary stuff.
Pure brilliance.
This is why I have Reason on this show. It's a mutual appreciation society because we dig each other's work so much.
That was so good. Yeah. I just want you to repeat that whole first part especially. I can definitely... you should know about this book, Natural Healing for Schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And Other Common Mental Disorders by Eva Edelman. And on page 58 it says that B12, folic acid, and fatty acid imbalances influence histamine formation and affect the histamine axis schizophrenias. And what's interesting to me about this particular thing is I was tested for nutritional deficiencies, and I don't have any kind of diagnosis or schizophrenia or something like that in terms of mental health, but I am deficient in folic acid, and I have problems with my B12 metabolization or whatever the word is for that. I can't remember all things.
How do you get tested for your deficiencies? And nutrients and that kind of thing? Is there a simple, inexpensive way to do it? Or?
Well, some of it's covered by insurance and some of it isn't. I did have to pay an extra $100 for the SpectraCell testing for my nutritional deficiencies. And a lot of them can affect your mental health. Like I was deficient in vitamin E, zinc, calcium, not B12, but I have this other thing going on with my B12 that's really scary. And these things can be related to like Alzheimer's and
sounds like a really wise way to invest $100 to find out what. So how would someone go about getting tested for, nutritional deficiencies and that kind of thing?
I would be really careful about what doctors you see. I would only see doctors.
Yeah.
Only see doctors that are referred.
Who are good doctors in this area that you know, or can you give us one or two?
Well, there's Northampton Wellness Associates, which is, not perfect. They are flawed, and I'll say it directly. They have their flaws, but we are so lucky in this area to have this kind of clinic that takes insurance. They don't take Mass Health, but they do take insurance and Medicare, and they treat chronic illnesses like specifically, and they have a whole bunch of different practitioners. It's Barry Elson, Darren Lynch. There's a bunch of different people there, and they're very familiar with the stuff and the up-to-date scientific stuff, generally speaking. So that's one place. I know Dr. Brummer is a relatively aware physician who also does acupuncture, I believe. There are a few others, and people can email me, reason@antidoteradio.com, if they have further questions. But I would look for referrals from people who, are doing well and seem like they really have a good story to tell. Don't just go anywhere, and don't just go to one place because of your insurance. Do your research. There's always somebody else. If you're having problems, there's probably somebody else who can serve you better and who's knowledgeable. And you have to know about labs like Great Smokies, which has a new name now, Genelex, I think, Immunosciences. There's so much testing that can be done. And then there's a website called ELISA Act, ELISAACT.com, I believe it is. But the ELISA testing is like completely comprehensive. It talks about all of your allergies to chemicals, to foods, and what's actually in your body, I believe.
How do you deal with dealing with quacks or dealing with getting taken advantage of? Because there's a lot of nutritional. If you Google nutrition and holistic health, you just get massively bombarded with all kinds of stuff, and a lot of it is not good stuff.
Well, one of the things that people do is sell a lot of supplements, and they're expensive.
Yeah.
So I can't do a lot of what my doctor recommends I do. I can't do most of it because I don't have the money. But what I find helps me most is not doing.
Right.
So there might be a couple of supplements that I've found that really work for me, and one of them, my liver thing, is only like $8 for a bottle.
I think we actually might be on automation right now because of the because of this storm, but we're gonna have to.
No, your levels are going. If your levels are going, we're on.
Yeah, they kick in automatically though with the storm. So, but it is actually 6:59. I'm really sorry to cut you off right in the middle of there. It's 7:00. We are gonna have to wind down the show. Thank you so much for this great opportunity to talk about these issues. I want to definitely have you back on the show. Part two, the website is
AntidoteRadio.com.
And your show is
Antidote Radio with the Voice of Reason.
And when is it?
7:30 to 9 p.m. Tuesdays.
Cool. Thank you so much for joining us. And you're listening to WXOJ Valley Free Radio 103.3 FM. And thanks for joining.
Bye-bye.